All right, so today we're starting chapter 2. This is section 1, and it has this super fancy name. It's called Using Inductive Reasoning to Make Conjectures. So when you are at the dinner table and your parents say, "What did you learn at school today?" you can say, "I used inductive reasoning to make conjectures," and they'll be like, "Wow, you're super fancy." All right, so that's super fancy for basically discovering a pattern or proving a pattern not true or a statement false. All right, so one of the types of problems that you're going to see is where they're going to ask you to find the next item in a pattern. All right, so if they give you January, March, May, they'll want you to find the next item in the pattern. Pretty complicated. Who thinks they can find the next item in this pattern? Yes, ma'am. July. So July is the next item in the pattern. How would you describe the pattern to somebody who doesn't see it? Right, you're alternating months. You're skipping a month. Alternating. Sometimes they'll give you patterns with numbers, like example number 2. 7, bless you, 14, 21, 28. They'll want you to find the next number in the pattern. Anybody think they know the next number in this pattern? What'd you get? 35 is correct. Okay, so 35 is the next number in the pattern. How would you describe the pattern to somebody who doesn't see it? Multiples of 7. All right, so let's talk about something called inductive reasoning. Which is in the title. This inductive reasoning, this fancy words for basically finding a pattern and then making a prediction about what the next thing will be or what's happening. You're going to make something called a conjecture. And this conjecture is something that you believe to be true. You're making this conjecture based on the information they give you, and you're saying, this is true based on what I know from what they've told me. Okay? So there's a couple steps I want you to follow in making your conjecture. First, obviously, look for a pattern. It may take a minute to see it. You might have to go, I need a hint. But stare at it for a minute and see if you can figure out the pattern. Second, you're going to make a conjecture, which is fancy for prediction. And then third, you're going to prove the conjecture. Now, sometimes to prove a conjecture, you might have to come up with a million examples, and they're all true. But once you come up with one that is not true, you're going to find what's called a counter example. And you just need one. One counter example will make it false. If you can just find one thing, that will make your conjecture false. But if you can't find one, then it's going to be true. So here is an example, and it's going to seem weird at first, but we're going to prove it, or see if we can prove it false. So example number 3, we're going to show that the conjecture is false. And here is the statement. 2 complementary angles are not congruent. Move that up. So example number 3, we want to prove that this conjecture is false. So we need to come up with just one example that will make it false. But we can think of a lot of things that will make it true. And we can come up with a bunch of them, right? Complementary, we learned in last chapter, means what? Oh man, you just had a test on it yesterday. What is complementary? Not 180, 90. So 2 angles whose sum is 90. So if I told you an angle was 10 degrees, what angle would you add to that to get 90? 80. And that would equal 90 degrees. Those 2 angles are not congruent. 10 and 80, not congruent. One's small, one's big, right? How about if I gave you an angle of 30 degrees? 60. They would sum or add up to 90 degrees. Those 2 angles are not congruent. Let's do one more. Somebody give me a number. 15. 15 degrees plus how much is going to add up to 90? Yes, 75. I'd think about that for a second. So 15 degrees plus 75 degree angle adds up to 90 degrees. They are not congruent. We just need one example to prove this false. Anybody know it? One example to prove this statement false. 2 angles that are going to add up to 90, and they are going to be congruent. Yes, 45 plus 45 equals 90 degrees. So a 45 degree angle and a 45 degree angle equals 90 degrees. This is our counter example. And we just proved that statement